Imagine a quiet suburban street, white fences glinting under the afternoon sun. When suddenly chaos erupts, a furious HOA Karen sprays a defenseless, diabetic child with an ice-cold garden hose over a picket fence. Neighbors gasp, cameras roll, and within minutes, the footage spreads online. But what she doesn't know is that the child's parent isn't just another homeowner. They're a battle-hardened compliance enforcer, armored and armed with legal warrants, and they're already on their way. If you're new here, you're about to hear a true-style HOA saga so gripping it feels like a movie. Stick around for the full story, and if you love watching HOA bullies get their comeuppance, tap subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss our next viral drama in a picture-perfect HOA community. Rows of manicured lawns hid the constant simmer of tension between residents and the HOA board. The protagonists had tried to keep life peaceful for their diabetic child, building a backyard safe zone with shade, toys, and snacks to manage blood sugar levels during playtime. Karen, the self-appointed enforcer of unwritten aesthetic rules, had long resented the family's privacy fence and the small medical cooler by the back porch. Rumors swirled at board meetings, fueled by Karen's loud complaints about health hazards and rule violations that didn't actually exist. One sweltering afternoon, while the protagonist was stuck in traffic returning from a doctor's appointment, Karen spotted the child reaching for their insulin kit through the fence slats. Convinced she was cleaning up an eyesore, she snatched her garden hose, turned the nozzle to jet, and blasted the child with icy water until the cooler toppled and spilled its contents across the grass. The child screamed for help as Karen barked orders, believing she was righting some imaginary wrong. Cell phones appeared over fences. Neighbors whispered. Some recorded the scene but hesitated to intervene, afraid of Karen's influence over the HOA board. The child stumbled inside crying, blood sugar plummeting, clutching the soaked insulin kit. In that moment, something in the neighborhood shifted. Everyone knew the line had been crossed. But few realized how prepared the protagonist truly was to respond by the time the protagonist's car turned onto the street. Their phone was buzzing with texts and videos from concerned neighbors. Their heart pounded as they watched the footage at a red light. Karen, sneering, wielding the hose like a weapon. They pulled into the driveway, calm but laser-focused, stepping out in full protective gear armor plates under a neat jacket, body cam blinking red and a heavy folder of legal warrants tucked under one arm. Years working in compliance enforcement for a federal agency had left them with not just experience, but authority. As neighbors peeked through blinds, they walked straight to Karen's yard. The air felt electric. Karen tried to posture, but the protagonist's voice firm, precise, backed by legal citations, cut through the chatter. The HOA president, alerted by a flurry of calls, arrived just as papers were served. Karen's garden hose slipped from her grip. What she thought was an afternoon of petty dominance had just turned into the beginning of her unraveling that night. The neighborhood group chat exploded. Screenshots of warrants, medical photos, and witness statements circulated like wildfire. Karen's allies on the HOA board tried damage control, but too many residents had seen what happened. The protagonist filed a restraining order before midnight and submitted a formal complaint to state authorities. Meanwhile, their child rested safely under medical supervision. In kitchens and living rooms up and down the block, people whispered that the balance of power had shifted. For years, Karen had bullied families, threatened fines, and wielded rules as weapons. Now she was facing someone she couldn't intimidate, someone who understood every loophole and had the evidence to back it up. As Chapter 1 closed, the image of Karen standing stunned on her wet driveway burned into every neighbor's memory. Setting the stage for the storm about to come, the next morning began with sirens echoing faintly down the street. Not for an arrest yet, but for a welfare check on the child, requested by local authorities after the videos went viral overnight. News vans circled the cul-de-sac. Karen tried to spin the story, claiming she was cleaning off allergens and helping the child, but the footage told another story entirely. The protagonist, meanwhile, prepared a meticulous legal assault. Years in enforcement had taught them to move methodically, file injunctions, notify insurance companies, and freeze HOA funds pending investigation. They documented every hostile act Karen had committed in the past year and lined up witnesses who had finally found their courage. Karen's smugness began to crack as letters from lawyers and state agencies arrived in her mailbox. Meetings she once dominated now felt like interrogations. Board members started distancing themselves, fearing they'd be next. The protagonists stayed outwardly calm, focusing on their child's recovery. But behind the scenes built a case so tight it would redefine how the HOA operated. Meanwhile, the neighborhood transformed. Where once people avoided conflict, now they rallied quietly, sharing information and supporting the protagonist. Someone started a petition to remove Karen from the board. Another neighbor offered to testify about fines she'd issued without approval. The protagonist coordinated these efforts while staying legally above reproach, every step documented, every move timed. Karen, sensing the tide turning, escalated, sending threatening emails, posting accusations on social media, trying to paint herself as the victim. But each move only gave the protagonist more evidence. By the end of Chapter 2, Karen was no longer the hunter, but the hunted. Standing alone at HOA meetings as residents demanded answers, cameras rolling. Her one-siren grip slipping through her fingers. Chapter 3 opened with a full-blown HOA emergency meeting under media scrutiny. Local reporters camped outside. The protagonist arrived, calm, armored, not in steel, but in paperwork. Torrents, affidavits, and a cease and desist order. Their child, now stable, sat quietly with a trusted neighbor in the back. Karen tried one last tirade, but the president, facing his own liability, called the meeting to order and allowed the protagonist to present evidence. Witness after witness testified. Video after video played. The room fell silent as the timeline unfolded. Years of harassment culminating in the hose incident. Then came the warrant search orders for HOA records, subpoenas for financial accounts, and a personal restraining order against Karen. Gasps filled the room. Karen's face drained of color as she realized she wasn't just losing power. She was facing legal consequences she'd never imagined. Outside, the community began to heal. Parents who once feared fines let their children play in yards again. Volunteers repainted common areas without Karen's micromanagement. The HOA board voted to remove her permanently and cooperate with investigators. Karen retreated into her house as process servers arrived, blinds drawn. The protagonists didn't gloat. They focused on rebuilding their child's sense of safety and ensuring lasting change. By the end of Chapter 3, Karen's reign had ended. But the story wasn't over. State investigators were now combing through HOA records, and the protagonist was about to set a new precedent for how bullies like. Karen could be held accountable in communities everywhere. Thank you for watching this wild HOA saga unfold. If you want to see more stories where justice catches up with HOA bullies and self-appointed enforcers, smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and hit subscribe so you never miss our next viral takedown.